can you advise the 16-year-old thing there?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of On the Job with PORAC. I'm Brian Marvel, president of PORAC. With me is PORAC Vice President Damon Kurtz. Today we're hosting California State Assemblymember Jim Cooper to discuss current state legislation and the effect of COVID-19 has had on our state's elected officials in Sacramento. Assemblymember Cooper represents the 9th Assembly District, which covers portions of Sacramento and San Joaquin counties. So he's the perfect representative to talk about Sacramento legislation. Well, welcome here, Jim.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I guess we'll just dive right into this. The biggest question that we get from members, especially going to like our chapter meetings and stuff, is how has COVID-19 affected the way the legislators legislate? And these are all just my words, but, it almost feels like the legislation's being done in a silo. And I know that's not necessarily the case because, we talk to a lot of legislatures, but it'd be good to get some inside perspective on what your thoughts and feelings are around that.
Sure. That's actually a good portrayal, Brian. And one of the reasons is, so typically in a session, a one-year session, you'll have 100 committee meetings. So last year, in the committee I chaired, we usually had about 10 meetings. We had 2 meetings. So to jam all that into 2 meetings, there's not a lot of deliberation, not a lot of debate. So it doesn't really make for good policy. And that's a tough part. So from going to 100 committee meetings down to probably a couple of dozen at best, it's not good because you want bills vetted because, when it starts out, sometimes you have unintended consequences. So that's how you vet that out in committee hearings and then actually through the floor debate. So you didn't see much of that. So it really was, in effect, siloed last year. And we're seeing a continuation of that this year. So very few meetings. No one's allowed the building. So typically a lot of folks come in. You guys come in on a regular basis where we talk. Now it's by phone or by Zoom. So it's not really productive.
Yeah, I remember that was a big issue for us last year, and obviously it's going to carry over this year, is having access to our elected officials, especially on some of these bills where you talk about unintended or intended, consequences, and having the ability to, have those conversations, at length.
But that's a good point. Nothing happens by chance. Mm-hmm. A lot of these things happen on purpose, and people know exactly what they're doing when they craft this legislation.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of consternation about several bills that didn't make it to the other house to get passed, to be sent to the governor's desk. But, the reality was, and, Damon said it and you said it was, there really wasn't a lot of discussions. And when it comes to our occupation and our profession, and you are very well attuned to this, being a former captain with the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, is you're dealing with people's safety, their ability to go to the store, to drive around, to not be assaulted, to not be robbed, and to not have a thorough discussion, a vetting, working in a collaborative nature on public safety bills, I think is detrimental to the state of California. And I was happy that none of those bills made it off, obviously, but the good thing is there's commitments to move forward. How do you work with your other colleagues in the legislature to focus on legislation that you feel is important, that you want to run through the state?
Well, I'm in my 7th year now. When I first came in 7 years ago, I was playing some offense and trying to run some good bills. So in that 7 years, it's changed. So now you're playing defense most of the time. You're trying to I'll be honest, they're shitty bills. You're trying to make them less shittier, to be quite frank. And it's just through amendments, things like that. And I'll give you a good one, was the use of force. Is it deadly force or Gibson?
What do you mean? The carotid restraint through
The carotid. The carotid. I mean, the carotid was going to be taken away last year. And it's deadly force, but you can shoot someone with your gun, but you can't use a carotid. That doesn't make any sense. So we got together and talked with the author and had him do an amendment to the Daily Journal that allowed officers to use a carotid as deadly force. So some departments went away from that, and I was surprised by that, because if you're fighting for your life out there, you got to do whatever it takes to survive that.
Well, I think right now the chiefs and sheriffs are they're on edge, and they see something coming, and they're just trying to get in front of it, and so that it doesn't become a political fiasco for them if an incident happens. So they're changing their policies. They're doing things to be proactive in the sense of what they see coming, but they're jumping the gun. They're not waiting for the discourse to happen for, where is this bill going to end up ultimately? I'm assuming they still see the importance of, say, the carotid restraint, but they're not willing to go to the media and fight for it because, obviously when you're dealing with folks that are elected or appointed, they're also worried about maintaining that position. So
it's interesting. A lot of these things that have happened in the last couple of years, last few years, have happened outside of California for the most part, and we're dealing with the aftermath of that. And there's bills that the decert bill came up last session to decertify officers through post. It would have passed if not for things getting hung up. And that version was very troublesome because you look at the lawyer appeals board, half those members are lawyers. Same with doctors, half. For the decert bill last year, there would have been 9 members, only 3 from law enforcement, no labor, all managers, and then 6 community activists. And one of those activists had to have a family member that was killed by law enforcement.
Right. And it's funny how we focus so much on bias, and yet they put together a panel that was completely biased against a certain group. There was nothing objective about that. And so it's kind of a little humorous if you look at it from that perspective.
So that's why I'm running a decert bill this year. And it's much better. And they're saying, well, you're a former cop. Why would you run a decert bill? Because a decert bill will be passed in the legislature this year. So you have to have options and give member options. Do you want the really bad bill from last year where there was no definition of serious misconduct, no appeals process, and there was double jeopardy? Or do you want an appeal process a decert process that's fair? And that's really the big thing. And also, 45 states have
46 now.
46 now
Yep.
have a decert
Licensing.
process, and California doesn't. So it's one of those things where it has to happen. It's going to happen. And hopefully we can help drive that narrative. And really the biggest thing is to give members an option so they can say, hey, look, I prefer this bill versus this other bill.
Absolutely. I think from our perspective, we've never really been afraid of decertification. There's nothing wrong with it. Good cops don't want bad cops working. That we say that. I know that sometimes it falls on deaf ears, but that's really true. We just want the process to be fair and objective and not be, completely biased. That's really it. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the decertification.
The ironic part is you have the American Civil Liberties Union, which is pretty much the driving force on all this police reform. But when it comes to making sure that officers have due process rights, they're very deaf on that issue and actually feel that we don't deserve due process rights, which is very unfortunate.
And that's important, Brian, because the ACLU is down there every day, and all these social justice reform groups are down there every day in the hallways, knocking on doors, making phone calls. And PORAC's a big organization, and we have the other law enforcement unions and organizations. But that's the reason you pay your dues for wages, benefits, and working conditions. So don't complain about that because it helps, because you have to have that voice in there. Otherwise, your voice is not even heard. And it's a battle every day. I mean, there are so many folks lined up against law enforcement that your union reps, Damon and Brian, are here representing you to make sure that you aren't getting screwed over. And that's what we're seeing right now. They really don't care. They want zero accountability. Some of the folks I work with, they don't care. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. And, it's funny, Damon and I were just talking about this yesterday, is that, politics is a participation sport. And you either show up or you don't. And if you don't, then you're going to have to live with the consequences. And like you said, we're sort of seeing that right now. Hopefully, and that sort of dovetails into, one of the other questions I wanted to ask you was how do we bring back civility to the political discourse? How do we have conversations? I have a lot of friends in the legislature. Philosophically, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I'm still friends with them. And it's like, how do we bridge that gap to where, we may have differences of opinion, we have differences of thought, But yet, at the end of the day, we can go down and have dinner, break bread, have a nice conversation, and enjoy our company outside of the political spectrum. It almost seems now that there's this divide. If you don't believe in what I believe in or think or how I think, we cannot be friends and we cannot function together. And that's the way it is.
Well, it is very hyper-partisan right now. It's been that way. The vitriol is it's unbelievable, and it continues day after day after day. And, we've got to change that and do what's done. Now, for law enforcement, the majority of the public supports law enforcement. We've seen the polls. They support law enforcement. They love law enforcement. Do they want a few changes? Absolutely. But they support us, so just know that. And it's just being engaged. Change will occur at the public level in the districts, because it's interesting. I live here in Sacramento, but you come to Sacramento and you vote on 3,000 bills in a year, and rarely do you hear from your constituents. The only times you hear from your constituents is if some group or organization says, hey, call them, email them, and complain. And that happens very rarely during a session. So most of the time, you just don't hear from people. So to change things, it comes from the district. Those constituents who vote that member in can express their displeasure or pleasure with them. And that's really where change occurs. And also, I want to do a pitch here. We need more public safety members, more law enforcement involved in politics at the local level to build that bench, whether you're on a city council member, a board of supervisors, or a park or rec or fire district, to come in there and gain that, because you have a great story to tell versus somebody else. I mean, I'm being honest, a businessman or someone that's been a political, employee or worker, you have a great story to tell in law enforcement. So I wholeheartedly support more folks from law enforcement coming in there. And like I said, the stuff that law enforcement deals with, a lot of these folks haven't dealt with day in and day out. And you can come in there and not be scared to make these decisions. So come join me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Jim, is that, officers and deputies, they're making decisions all the time. And, the part that really bothers me a lot when you go to these hearings and you hear these activists, you worked thousands of hours as a Sacramento deputy. And how many situations did you de-escalate in your career? Thousands. But you're never going to see a news story on that. And it happens all the time, every day across the United States. And then you'll have an incident, and then you watch the news, and it's like this happens every day, all the time, in every place in America. And that's just not true. No,
it's true. You try to change that. It's just it's frustrating. You just want to bang your head against the wall, and how do we change that narrative and really educate people? So it's a constant battle in what we do.
Well, I appreciate you trying to push our members to get into politics, because I know Damon and I have been doing that at chapter meetings. It's a big issue. One other item is you're the chair of the Public Employees Retirement System, which is great news. Obviously, like you stated earlier, benefits and compensation are vitally important to our members. What do you see on the horizon as the chair of that committee?
We're going to deal with AB 1496, and that's some cleanup to the Alameda decision. Obviously, that came back last year. That wasn't good for law enforcement as far as final compensation and pay. So we're trying to clean some of that language up. We hope to do that. Every year, we also have divestment bills. So over the years, PERS has divested from, and STIRS both, from guns, tobacco, oil, and other things. And, obviously PERS is not fully funded. We want to make sure it's fully funded. So who's to be the moral police out there that people do smoke, people use gasoline for their cars. So that's not our job. So for the past several years, we've been able to stop divestment bills and not divest from anything. We want the best returns possible on people's retirement. You've worked a job and you're guaranteed that defined benefit. We want to make sure the money's there to pay you. So we fight that continually with some of these bad bills. And it's so important. Like I said, PORAC, wages, benefits, and working conditions. That's why you pay dues, to have someone represent you, to be in Sacramento and read through these 3,000 bills a year to make sure the bad bills don't get through or they get amended to lessen that impact on your members.
It's always the highlight of our data when all the bills are finally there, and obviously, they all dropped last Friday, and there's a ton of spot bills, so we still don't know what they're going to be, right? And then we still don't have the committee bills, but we have all these 2,000 plus bills sitting there, and it's always fun for us to sit down and go through bill by bill to go and scratch our heads. Like, usually the question is why? Why is this a bill? And then sometimes it's, ones that we flag, obviously, that we're, adamantly opposed to. So
So don't complain about paying dues. I was a board member for our Deputies Sheriff Association and our Managers Association, and it's just so important, especially today more so than ever, to make sure you're protected, because it's crazy. There's another bill coming back this year, failure to intervene. If you don't intervene and something happens, you're held liable. You can be fired and prosecuted. So it's just, it's on the surface, it sounds like it might be a good idea, but there are a lot of mechanics in there, and it's really the devil's in the details. We want to make sure that it's done right and doesn't hamper anybody, because law enforcement's a tough job. You're dealing with life and death and making split-second decisions. My colleagues who I've worked with have never had to make those decisions, and and no one's dying in the legislature when they're voting on bills and debating things. No one's dying. And in your profession, it's split-second decisions that you may live with the rest of your life, and no one takes joy in that. It's a tough job.
Yeah, and you've lived both sides, because you've been out there and you had to make those decisions. But now you're in the legislative piece, and the legislatures get to talk and discuss and parse every second of a video or an incident ad nauseum.
And you have people that come in, witnesses from these groups, that just lie. For Prop 47, they were said if we change Prop 47, there would be 4,000 unintended consequences from Prop 47. This person said this in a hearing, and we're like, well, what are they?
It's always interesting to me that, we sit through some of these hearings, particularly in public safety, because that obviously affects us. And folks come in to testify, and there's no requirement for them to swear in. There's no oath taken. Like if you're going to court and you're swearing on your testimony, this is true and factual, and the stories that are told are not factual. We could sit there and Google them when they're talking about their incidents and go, well, they're leaving a lot out. And, it's unfortunate. That's kind of where these bills are, decided upon, is based on, false testimony. And then a lot, in some cases, really, it's their knowledge of law enforcement is based on the entertainment industry. It's not really based on factual life and what happens out there. It's crazy.
It is, and there's a criminal justice reform panel that's coming up this year. Some recommendations. They want to make 12500 and 14601 CVC. They want to make that infractions, and it's like people just drive and don't care right now. So it's just they do these things that it sounds good, but there's major problems with that. So it's just constantly, like I said, you're playing defense and you're just trying to get those amendments in there where it makes the bill not as crappier. And that's the sad commentary, where you can't go out and try and do positive bills to get them through because it's so hard.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the vehicle code stuff. So, just go south of here in Oakland, and these sideshows they're turning deadly. And there's you have elected officials who basically don't want to do anything about that. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know how. I look at San Francisco and talk about a community that has a high tolerance for victimhood, and they accept it. It boggles the mind that they're willing to accept that level of victimhood.
And Brian, when I came in, I go, okay, at some point the pendulum's going to swing and it's going to change, but the house has to burn down. And I'm being honest, and it hasn't, because you need a polyclass type case to happen for things to change. Something has to come, but I'm just surprised it hasn't happened yet.
I think George Gascon's trying to make that happen for us. So,
yeah, I think LA may be the case in point, because I don't think people in Los Angeles are going to tolerate the level that you see in San Francisco.
No, so it's tough. It's a tough job, and you guys dealing with the people, and you have to go in every member's office over there and talk to them and their staff, and you guys have a tough job up here. It's not an easy job, lobbying here in Sacramento, and like I said, you have people that aren't your friends, that don't like you, but you still got to have that dialogue with them to do that. So that's it's tough.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I appreciate all the comments. I know there's one bill that's probably going to come your way as the PERS. We just recently ran across it. It's a bill that will allow public employees to choose between a pension or a defined contribution plan. I think everybody should have a defined benefit plan. I wish there was a way we could work out something for everybody in the state of California to have one. I firmly believe that retirement security is going to be the next major crisis that faces America. I already think we're already in the crisis. It's just people aren't recognizing it. when you get these kind of bills, and obviously, from your perspective and your opinion on this, I mean, I just don't understand why some legislatures would want to destroy somebody's retirement security, knowing all of the fragility that we've seen over the last 18 months with COVID.
Right. Think about this, your 401s, your 457s, those are really made for rich people to put, originally people that were well off, to put money away to defer taxes. It wasn't made for that. And you also have the volatility of the stock market versus a defined benefit. You've worked this time, you're going to get that certain paycheck once a month, no matter what. It doesn't change. And we've seen the stock market go up and down. So yes, a defined benefit pension plan is a way to go, not to deal in the stock market. And we're very fortunate. And yeah, law enforcement's paid good, but they do a job that most folks would not want to do. So, but besides that, the average pension is probably $2,000 in California. That's not a lot of money.
And it's crazy. That bill in particular is, if you look at it, it's literally, in my opinion, designed to destabilize the pension system.
Right. So you hear people just rail on it constantly. These high salaries. And yeah, I mean, city managers and some folks make some good money, but when you look at the average pension, like I said, it's $2,000. Yeah. And STRS is less. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where you're dealing with that. And like I said, people rail on it, but I keep coming back to, like I said, PORAC's mission is to take care of their employees, and that's what they're there fighting every day for you guys. And we appreciate that. Someone that's retired and gets a pension, I know it's tough, and we want to make sure that at the end of the rainbow, when you do retire, that pension's there for you and it's whole, and that entity who you worked for keeps their promises.
I'm going to bring you back to do a commercial for us.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I agree. I think Jim's been our biggest advocate to our membership, and I really appreciate that. So I was going to close it up. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, the men and women out there, PORAC, it's a tough job. It's a thankless job right now, and people are complaining and yelling at you and cursing at you and wanting to do harm to you. But the vast majority of Californians appreciate the job you do. It's tough. Just keep doing it. And like I said, we appreciate you. We love you. God bless you, and be safe.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Jim. Jim's a fantastic friend for PORAC and all law enforcement, and he's really looking out for the safety of the community in his district, but also the state of California. So I want to thank you for coming in. We could probably have another conversation down the road, and look forward to it, because we could probably just talk law and order stuff, especially being a former captain at the Sac Sheriff. So I look forward to doing that. I want to thank you for joining us on this latest episode of On the Job with PORAC. We hope you enjoyed it. We'd like to take this time to say thank you to all our PORAC members and our nation's law enforcement. Be safe and have a great day. PORAC is California's largest law enforcement organization and the largest statewide association in the nation, representing over 77,000 public safety members since 1953. Our monthly podcasts, as well as past episodes, are available on PORAC.org, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, PORAC's YouTube channel, or where popular podcasts are downloaded. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms and tag us with your suggestions for future show topics. To learn more about our organization, visit us at PORAC.org. We are PORAC.